to Good Game, the show for gamers by gamers. I'm Hex.
And I'm Barjo, and doesn't it feel good to be saying that again, Hex?
It certainly does. Back in the den of gaming with a whole year ahead of us. Is it going to be a good one, do you think, for games?
Well, I have a theory that 2011 will be seen as the golden age of this generation of consoles, where developers push the hardware to their very limits.
So not quite as good as last year, you think?
I think maybe a little bit better, but not a huge leap. But that's not a bad thing, because last year I think was the biggest year for gaming we've ever had.
Definitely.
The big question is, do you think that Microsoft and Sony will announce new consoles at E3 this year?
Well, they've both said no, so maybe. We do know we'll be getting a Wii U later on in the year, and we've already got the Vita, but we can't talk about that yet. So, Barjo, what is your most anticipated game for 2012?
I think Doom 4. It's running on the Rage engine, so I think it will look good. Plus, all that nostalgia's there. Can I have another most anticipated game?
Well, technically,
also very
no.
excited about Aliens, Colonial Marines, and Guild Wars 2, and the South Park RPG, actually.
Oh, I cannot wait for Diablo 3. I really hope it's amazing. And I also hope that Tomb Raider and The Last of Us will be released this year. And the game that I really took from E3 was, of course, Bioshock Infinite. I mean, I really love the art style, and I hope it's going to make me cry real tears of emotion, not frustration.
Well, these games and many, many more will be featured over 2012.
But in this show, we're going to be taking a look at Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning.
We'll also check out Star Wars: The Old Republic.
But before all that, can you guess the game for this week? Oh, well, it is Valentine's Day. And I see you've brought a rose. It's, I mean, who's that for?
So someone very special.
Really?
Good game.
My lord. The first-person shooter reboot of the Syndicate series has been refused classification in Australia. The Australian Classification Board found the violence in the game exceeded strong in playing impact due to detailed dismemberment and post-mortem damage. Publisher Electronic Arts confirmed they would not resubmit a censored version for classification. Publisher THQ is suffering significant financial difficulties. The company's stocks are currently valued well below US $1. As such, they may soon be delisted from the American Stock Exchange. In response, CEO Brian Farrell has taken a 50% pay cut, while over 240 jobs will be made redundant across the company, 14 of which will hit the THQ Melbourne office. And in other Australian industry news, Sega Studios Australia have confirmed the loss of 37 jobs once work is completed on the upcoming London 2012 game. Sega said that the job losses are because of the company's decision to refocus its business on digital avenues.
Good game.
Kingdoms of Amalur is a fantasy RPG set in the Feylands. It's got a bit of a twist on the RPG formula. In fact, you start the game dead. Your corpse is dumped on a pile of other failed attempts at necromancy, before you reawaken to find yourself wiped of any kind of predetermined fate.
Yes, in Amalur, every living creature has their fate etched in stone, but you, newly risen from the dead, have the unique ability to create your own. It's a clever way the story weaves itself into the player's role in choosing your class and character abilities that you'll be focusing on. You can choose from one of the 4 available races of human and elf, and thus, your adventure begins.
As you try to make sense of this mysterious well of souls that has apparently brought you back to life, and the sinister Tuatha who are encroaching on the Feylands, you attempt to fight your way out into the open and make immediate use of magical weapons and natural abilities you have at your disposal.
My first impressions of this game was that the art and design was a little bit cartoony. I mean, it was almost Blizzard-like with its bright colours and big oversized weapons. And I have to say that graphically, I wasn't that impressed.
See, I would have pegged you as really liking the look of this game, you know? It's got all those fantasy vistas that you quite like, and there's waterfalls and the big trees.
Yeah, I mean, I did do a few slow pans of the landscape here and there, but I do prefer the art to be a little bit more sophisticated than this. Parts of this world even felt a little kidsy with its magical fairyland and the fairy people with the flowers and the fairies and the cute little sprites and the hobgoblin enemies. Other areas later in the game do get a fair bit darker. don't know, the world just lacked punch for me.
My problem was to actually appreciate the beauty, you had to stop and look around because the camera angle has got this downward focus, which I didn't mind for the action, but you don't really get to take in the sights. The game's executive designer was the lead designer on Oblivion and Morrowind, and you can see that DNA intertwined with it here. It reminded me a lot of Fable in certain areas, but it lacks all of the charm and personality of the Fable games. Still, I enjoyed the combat here much more than the Fable games, and had quite a good time running around with my warrior, stabbing everything I could see.
Well, on that, we should probably talk about the crazy class system.
Ah yes, the class system itself is actually pretty standard. You can put points into sorcery, might, or finesse, but each class uses a combination of magic and melee, and the customization options are practically endless.
I, of course, went straight rogue. I can't help it, it's what I love, it's what I know, and it's how I like to roleplay. My elf had a variety of nasty stealth attacks, ice traps, poison clouds, but she also had lightning bolts and could wield a mage's staff if she wanted to. I put a lot of points into Feyblade Mastery though, and I have to say, Feyblades were my favourite, so quick and deadly, although they do look a bit ridiculous strapped to your back when you're just running around.
I loved my scorpion spear to pull enemies closer. Get over here! Get over here! Get over here!
I really enjoyed having a good combo of magic and melee. Given that I put all of my points into finesse, it makes combat feel meaty and varied, so you don't tire of any battles since you have such a great array of options. But here's where it gets crazy. You can respec your entire character, including class, whenever you want. It costs a bit of coin, but it's easily doable. The question is, would you want to?
Absolutely. I always wonder how the other classes have it. This is a big game, possibly hundreds of hours of gameplay. Can't guarantee I'm going to replay the entire thing just so I can have a go at sorcery.
I disagree. I mean, for me, an RPG is a really complete experience. I mean, when I create a character, I'm really committed to her. You know, I build her up from the beginning, I hone her skills till she's a master at her craft. To suddenly snap my fingers and suddenly become a mage, I just can't do that. It feels like all this hard work for nothing.
At least they backed up that decision with story.
Yeah, but even that I found pretty lacking. I mean, every time I had to talk to that fate guy, I just found myself skipping through it.
I've spent the last 20 years knowing what fate had in store for me.
Shut up.
I hated every single word in this game, and the voice acting didn't really match the characters. Those gnomes sounded so weird, but just none of the dialogue gripped me or had me invested in the character, so skip.
Skip it.
Skip it.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to get straight back to the action, which for the most part is pretty damn good. It's full of good old-fashioned adventure cliches like, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is.
Enemies vary throughout Amalur, and in MMO-like fashion are often grouped with a handful of easier enemies and one heavy hitter. Often they rely on stringing together combos that constantly knock you back and will wipe you out quickly if you don't manage to time a string of hits in first.
But you also have a fate meter, which allows you to enter reckoning mode, which will help you in a bind by allowing you to obliterate everything in sight and perform a devastating takedown. I'd say it isn't an I win button though, because it takes practically forever to regenerate, so you really need to save it for those moments when you absolutely need it most. You can fast travel between points you've already been to, but it's important to save often. Some deaths took me back to a save point in the game 15 minutes ago prior to an entire dungeon I just completed.
Yeah, the map was okay. I think it could have been better though, but those quest checkpoint markers were very confusing.
Yeah, at one point I was cursed and looking for a healer, and the map wouldn't tell me which town had one in it unless I was actually in that town at the time. You kind of just need to rely on your memory or travel from town to town until you find one with a specific trade that you need. While running about the place, you'll also gather herbs which you can combine at alchemy tables to create your own potions. This is initially done by pure experimentation, which I really loved. You discover the recipe for a fire resistance potion by just picking 2 herbs at random and mixing them together.
It's the same with sagecraft. You find crystal shards around the place in treasure chests, and you can use those to make gems which you slot into your armor. There were so many loot hacks, I just kept finding armor everywhere, which is good because you'd use those as salvage for the blacksmithing, and I love blacksmithing. I like a blacksmith for days.
Really? I mean, I got some great weapons, that's for sure. Like I said, Feyblades were insanely awesome to use. But I found things severely lacking on the armor side. I was just running around in the same crummy leathers for hours because, you know, I'd modded them with gems and couldn't find anything better.
Yeah, I think you can play this game a few different ways. I think it's a real strength of the game, actually, because I was swapping my gear out all the time because I had lots of points in Detect Hidden, so I was just finding loots under rocks and trees and everywhere.
So much of Amalur feels empty to me. It just doesn't feel inhabited. Even the hub areas are sparse. And it annoyed me to no end that when running from place to place, you couldn't fall or jump off ledges unless there was a specific allocated jump point. This means you have to mostly stick to the path, which kind of defeats the purpose of true adventuring. Anyway, what are you giving it, Barger?
Well, look, it is pretty light on some areas, especially in the story side of things, but the combat is what kept me in it. I found it thrilling, so I'm giving this 8 out of 10 rubber chickens.
This is my genre. Truth be told, I love any fantasy RPG because that's where my heart is. But the story, the art, the whole world, and I guess some of the mechanics, they just didn't hit the chord with me as well as other games in this genre really have. So I'm gonna give it 7.
Plus, it's a stupid name. Kingdoms of Amalur.
Kingdoms of Amalur.
We spoke to producer Sean Bean and lead designer Ian Fraser about the game, and you can see that full interview on the website.
Load runner for the Commodore 64. Yeah, it was the first time that I got to make levels in a game, and I made these completely obtuse levels that only I, having made it myself, could do. I would actually just kind of spam bricks and bars and bad guys, and then I would play as fast as I could through it, and when I got to an impossible point, I knew it was impossible because I was that good. And so I just removed the brick and then keep going until I had this level that only I could beat.
Thinking back to last year, many of the major releases had something in common. They all broke street dates.
And on the surface, getting a game early may seem like only good news, but there are ramifications, as Goose finds out.
The wait for a new release can sometimes feel unbearable. For months you've been drip-fed sneaky screenshots and trailers, all the while counting down to that ever-important release date. So when a game does break street date and appears on store shelves early, the last thing many Aussie gamers are thinking when they're excited to get their hands on a new copy are some of the long-term effects it could have on the industry.
The whole process begins when a release date is set early on in a game's development process. Once the developers finish building the game, they send a finished version to their distributors, who arrange copies to be made, organise shipping, and generate hype through marketing and publicity. The last stage is when stores receive copies a few days before release. They're then trusted to sell on a specific date. It's when some retailers decide to sell before this date, which is causing the controversy.
This is a particular issue for gaming. If you think back to the Harry Potter releases, the hype around some of these books, it was very rare that you heard of a store that actually would be brave enough to do that, but we don't see that here in the gaming industry.
Street dates exist to even the playing field, and they're an important part of the distribution machine that surrounds a massive release.
We're at the rendezvous, but no sign of the package.
You kind of shoot yourself in the foot when you buy it in advance because you don't get that sort of excitement at the first day and some events that we might have had and stuff. It'd be more fun if they waited because they'd get more out of it, out of the launch of the game.
Some of last year's biggest titles like Battlefield 3 and Arkham City found their way into the hands of gamers before they officially went on sale.
What are you waiting for?
There was some confusion around Arkham City. The Catwoman DLC hadn't been activated worldwide because we hadn't hit the global street date. We were having a lot of complaints and a lot of issues with customers calling us saying my code isn't working for Catwoman, when in reality it actually hadn't been activated.
I'm kind of disappointed.
Strict guidelines and warnings are given to stores when they first receive shipments from the distributors, but anything from an unaware staff member to a really persistent customer can cause a game to slip out early.
And once this happens, other stores are forced to follow or potentially face huge losses. Expensive events like midnight openings and press events are now pretty much ruined.
Retailers will do anything that they can to be first to market. So I don't think there's anything wrong with if the product's going to be allowed to be sold, say, on a particular date, and that means 1 minute past midnight you can start selling it. There's nothing wrong with that retailer opening their doors and selling it. But for a retailer to, say, go out a day or 2 days before the marketing date, then yes, it's ethically very unreasonable of them, because that does make it difficult for the other retailers.
Star Wars: The Old Republic is a recent example to be victim of a broken street date, but with a difference.
When a global staggered release was set by EA for technical reasons, many Australian fans began grey importing, getting copies from overseas. This led some retailers to spurn local distributors, importing copies themselves and selling on to the public.
If this trend continues, distributors may try and prevent future breaks through online-only sales. But why?
If it breaks street date and then somebody hacks it and then there's hundreds of torrents and then nobody buys it, then we ended up having made a terrible business decision by making a great game. And that's depressing. I want to care about making great games, and then I want people to spend money on great games so that we have money to make the next great game. That's what the cycle should be.
All this could eventually affect you and I. Stores may no longer accept pre-orders, they may stock lower quantities, or not receive copies of the game right up until the very day of release.
Australia is a big country, and there are logistics in moving shipment and products around. So that could mean that customers may not have it on the actual release date if you live in Alice Springs and it doesn't get there in time.
When you're a market the size of this country, probably anywhere from 3 to 5% of the global market, it is insignificant in comparison to some of the big European or US markets. And if this becomes the norm, and the Skyrims and the Battlefields and the Arkham Cities continually break street dates, then what we're risking is a delay put on Australian releases across the board. That's something we don't want. It's something consumers and retailers don't want. But that is the path that we're going down.
Good game. Something wrong with this droid.
Really?
Help me through this flashpoint, guys. You're my only hope.
All right, well, I think that's about enough of that.
Yeah.
MMOs come and go free to play. They're a tough space to develop in, but if there's one universe that'll pique the interest of even the most burnt out MMOer, it's Star Wars. BioWare and LucasArts have joined forces to bring us the Old Republic.
What's wrong with you?
The official release date for Australia for the Old Republic is actually in March, and the promise of local servers too, so we had to get ours in on special import.
Delivery for Barjo.
Right here.
Oh!
I love MMOs, Hex, and I'm not afraid to admit it. Learning new ability cycles, playing with talent trees, teabagging in PvP, exploring giant worlds. Old Republic has this in spades. It's not friendly to newcomers, but if you've played any sort of MMO before, you'll slip right into a deep chair groove.
Set thousands of years before the movies, it's a time when the Empire and the Republic are at each other's throats, each trying to gain control of the galaxy.
If you'd heard what both sides are plotting, you wouldn't be eager to restart this war.
You'll find more than a few races experimenting and unlocking the power of the Force.
The races you can choose from are pretty rubbish, but the face customization options are pretty good. For example, this just looks like Goose. And they all have fantastic butts. The best butts in the galaxy. I suppose you'd want that because you're staring at the back of them for about 200 hours.
I don't think we need to talk about that, to be honest.
It's important to me.
I don't like where this is going.
You can be Empire or Republic, and there are 4 classes on each side. Each of these have 2 subset classes, each with 3 tech trees you can focus on. So there's heaps of options to play. I love my Cyborg Bounty Hunter badge. She's seriously badass. And you get a lot of really impressive looking abilities early on in the game, so it's so much fun charging into combat, blasters blazing. I really love the Rocket Punch. Rocket Punch! Rocket Punch! What's that? Rocket Punch!
I played a Sith Inquisitor Assassin, which is kind of like a rogue and a shaman mixed together, so lots of backstabbing and getting into stealth. The Sith Inquisitor storyline is all about climbing the ladder to the top and shocking everyone he can.
Look, lay off the lightning this time, okay?
It's so much fun.
There's your lightsaber. Now go, please.
Here's something to remember me by.
If there's a shock or a flirt dialogue option, Hex, I don't even read the other two.
Teach me to ever trust a Sith. They all lie through their teeth.
The classes respectfully embrace characters from both the films and universe. The Han Solo-inspired smuggler and the Imperial agent both use a cover system, which is a bit fiddly but quite fun to use, and it just feels like something Han would do. And there's no auto attack either, so it gets quite frantic, especially in PvP. You know, I thought I'd get jealous of you, Badge, with that lightsaber, but then I discovered I had a flamethrower. Amazing.
And the good thing is, every single class has their own storyline. So there's 8 individually crafted storylines. So we won't talk about them too much because they have spoilers.
Spoilers in an MMO? Well, I never.
I never killed a what is he again, Mako?
Trandoshan. Rhymes with dead meat.
And on top of that, both the Empire and Republic have a unique set of quests on either side, so there's a huge amount of content.
No, I get excited about going back to this game because I feel like my character has a personality and I'm excited to be her again.
It's time we cut the head off this serpent.
I loved knowing why I was doing what I was doing, even for the simplest of quests. It made all the difference, and I watched every single cutscene in full.
It makes such a difference, doesn't it? I mean, I have actual motivation for what I'm doing, and quite often there's a number of different choices within the quest with who I can choose to side with or help as a result.
Shame about the actual quests, though. They're about as interesting as the most boring quests in old WoW.
Let's check this bottle for surveillance. Watch my back. Check this bottle for surveillance. Search this bottle for some surveillance. I've surveilled it all.
Yawn.
Yeah, but the story makes up for it, Budge. I mean, the dialogue options you make are the interesting part, and when you're thrown a light side or a dark side choice as well, it gets even more engaging. I mean, I felt like I had the opportunity to roleplay my character exactly with the personality that I imagined her having.
Please, don't kill me.
I can't stand to see a grown Imperial cry.
I love all that, but the light side, dark side mechanic is broken because you absolutely have to go 100% dark side or 100% light side with all your choices, or you might not be able to use some of the really good gear in the game.
Yeah, it is pretty punishing for fence sitters, but in the end it was more important to me to roleplay my character how I wanted than to get light or dark side gear.
It's all about the gear, Hex.
It's not all about the gear. And in a universe where so much of the lore is so heavily based around the light and the dark side of the Force, is there room for fence sitters? I say not.
Words are unnecessary when the Force is with you.
Yeah, well, believe it. The Force is strong in me.
Either way, it's early days yet, so it may evolve in the way that WoW did.
I hope so, otherwise I think it'll struggle to keep people playing past 50. Instances or flashpoints are exciting though, and there's one in there that Knights of the Old Republic fans will lose their pants over. In fact, all the weapons and locations and sounds, they all just resonate so much with even the smallest of Star Wars fans, if that even exists. That there's a small fan of Star Wars out there. I think there's a few childhood gaming dreams here, Hex. Zipping about on Tatooine, fighting Jawas and Sam people, chasing mouse droids.
I loved getting in my ship for the first time. Oh, my lovely ship. It reminded me of that moment in Firefly when Mal first sees the Serenity and just falls in love with it. This is where I sleep. This is my droid. This is the captain's chair with the endless possibilities of space exploration stretching out in front of me. Ah, my ship.
I hate the ship so much. I hate everything about it. I hate the fact that it's got an escape pod that you can't use. It's got this stupid droid. It's got the only chair that you can sit on in the entire galaxy. But most importantly, I hate the fact I get lost in it. After 260 hours in this game, I'm still getting lost in my stupid ship because it all looks the same. But the absolute worst part is to travel from one planet to another, you have to go through your ship, which means there's about 3 or 4 loading doors in between and airlocks that you can't speeder bike through. You have to walk. I'm only a Sith Lord. I can't frickin' use my speeder bike in a frickin' corridor. I hate the ship so much. But the Line at Wars inspired ship missions are quite fun. They're a good distraction. They're not X-Wing vs TIE Fighter, which is really what we wanted, but I quite like them a lot.
Why is no one attacking me? Why are they all just flying in front of me?
MMOs are usually quite dull on your own, but here you can pretty much just turn off the chat window and solo this game to 50 with only the odd difficulty spike. To keep you company, you also have a variety of companions you can pull out, each with their own individual storylines. Having Mako around really changed my solo experience. She was always there to back me up, keep me healed, and offer some friendly banter as we set off to join the Great Hunt.
Never trust overly agreeable women. Well, except me.
Best friends! Mako is my best friend!
I love Chem Val. He's the one I use the most, and I like the way that he's always happy when I do something mean. I feel like he's just in the background there chuckling away. Companions also look after all of your crafting and collecting mats for crafting too, which is fantastic. It'd be good if every MMO could do that in future, please. You can even get it on with some of them and other NPCs, interspecialies, but not intersexualies.
Yeah, what was that about? I mean, it's 2012. This is a fairly big issue in this day and age, and we're hopefully working towards a fairly tolerant future. I mean, I reserve the right, at least in video games, to be a digital lesbian.
Me too.
I mean, flirting in games is fun no matter who you're flirting with, and whether or not you're gay or straight in real life. I found it odd that BioWare's other games commonly had same-sex interactions, yet they specifically chose not to do it here.
Sure you don't want to get some dinner with me?
Yeah, in fact, due to public outcry, BioWare are adding a gay patch, but it is interesting that they actively chose to omit it. They must have had a meeting and said, we've done it for other games, we've got flirting in there, but not for Star Wars, and it makes me wonder why.
Just do it. You'll feel better when it's done.
Well, we should wrap this up, but let's talk PvP quickly. It needs a lot of work, and each patch is clearing it up, but there's only 3 zones, and because of the pings at the moment, it's very hard for us Aussies, especially if you're a backstabber. Hopefully that'll change in March.
Let's go berserk!
The standout is Hutball. It's a nightmare on your own, but with friends working together, it's an exhilarating, futuristic version of Gridiron with fire and jump pads. It's a great feeling getting that ball over the line, although sometimes I take it over my own line, just like in high school. There's also a PvP planet called Ilum, which is completely broken. It's a fantastic idea, but the engine just can't handle that many people in one spot, so it runs between 2 and 14 frames per second in the big fights. It looks good though.
Yeah, at least it feels busy there. I mean, some of the planets feel empty, even when the server is full. I know you love a bit of PvP, Barjo. Do you think you'll keep playing?
While I love an MMO that's set in space that's not Eve, I've already quit.
Oh, you'll be back.
Yeah, maybe when the pings are good, but it's just so grindy. More than other MMOs, I think. I must have spent days at level 15 now in PvP, and I haven't got one piece of gear. It's just too hard and unfair, so I don't know. What are you giving it?
You know, I had all but sworn off MMOs for life, Barjo, and done nothing but preach their evils for the past year, but I am back in the game with this one. It's 8.5 from me.
Look, I had a good couple of 100 hours of fun here, so I'm going to give it 8.
Good game!
So did you guess the game for this week?
It was the 2002 action RPG Kingdom Hearts. The mashup of Disney and Square Enix characters could have been a total disaster, but actually turned out to be a cute and innocent love story. Aww. Well, that brings us to the end of our very first episode for 2012, which also happens to be our 200th episode of Good Game ever. Yay!
But we shall return next week with 201 and a look at the PlayStation Vita and one of its launch games, Uncharted Golden Abyss.
Jackie Estacado returns in the darkness too, and fingers crossed we'll also have a launch to announce of our own. But more on that mystery next week.
Don't forget your social medias. Please leave your thoughts on the show on the forums or the Facebook page, and each week we tweet along on the hashtag GGTV.
And for the younger gamers out there, Spawn Point starts up again this weekend on ABC3.
So until next week, gamers, Barjo out.
Hex out.
Don't get your hair out of it.